welcome to a very special edition of EWTN's Bookmark. I am Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest, our author, a great friend, the one and only Joan Lewis. Her book is A Holy Year in Rome, the complete pilgrim's guide for the Jubilee of Mercy, published by Sophia Institute Press. Joan, of course, Joan's Rome, a wonderful blog, our Rome bureau chief, a great friend for all of these years, and you're in our offices in Rome. Joan, how is Rome?
How are you? Well, Rome is, I think, weather-wise, we're better than you, and we're very happy here in the middle of this Jubilee year. Things have really picked up today. I was looking at some of the lines going into the Holy Door, and things are really picking up after a, quiet beginning to the new year, to the Holy Year.
Exactly. Now, Joan, this the last time I spoke to you actually about a book, we've talked about your work in Rome over the years on this show, but about your book, you also did a book that had to do with the Jubilee back in the year 2000, right?
I did indeed, looking at that Jubilee and that book, of which I had a single copy left at home, that was really kind of the foundation for this Holy Year of Mercy. And I mean, when Pope Francis announced this on the second anniversary of his election on March 13th of 2015, my first thought was, oh my word, I already kind of have the foundations for building a beautiful home. Mm-hmm. And so much of the content of that, the visit to the 7 pilgrim basilicas, which include, of course, the 4 papal basilicas, and looks at other churches in Rome, a history of jubilees, much of that foundation was already there, and then I just had to I added a great deal to this book. So obviously there's also a chapter called The Papal Surprise, and it's about the Pope's announcement. It's the Bull of Indiction for the Holy Year, so a lot of fun things.
Right, you've got a lot in here. Obviously, you've got also definitions so that people understand what different things mean, etc. One of the things that struck me that was interesting was you do a book like this, you expect here it is in a Holy Year in Rome, you give the context of going back when the Jubilee started and the popes, and you would expect that you would see maybe a quote from one of the Holy Fathers at the beginning, or even John Paul II, who you were very close with in many ways. But you actually have a quote from Shakespeare. Why did you pick that one?
I really have to tell you, the very day that Pope Francis did announce that he was going to convene a Holy Year, a Jubilee of Mercy, I heard the word mercy. And the first thought that came into my mind was from The Merchant of Venice. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven, and so forth. And as I was looking for stunning quotes about mercy from popes, obviously, primarily, this just kept being the refrain in my head. So I start the book with Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, The Quality of Mercy. And you know what? It sounds like Pope Francis could have written this.
Right, exactly. And of course, Shylock's speech from there, and also dealing with, of course, responding to people asking for a pound of flesh. And of course, I think that's what our Holy Father's message is too, is that sometimes people feel justified in getting their pound of flesh, and we have to step back and realize that God is really about mercy. Now, one of the things that's interesting in your book, and it's not unusual, it takes several pages to get into the meat of your book, because you usually have so many endorsements right at the top by a litany of who's who in the Catholic Church. And one of the quotes at the very beginning, and it's talking about you, says, her fervent, and meaning you, Joan, her fervent desire that each sojourner should experience the Jubilee not as a mere tourist, but most of all as a pilgrim ready to be a witness to the great mercy of God. And that's the one and only Archbishop Rino Fisichella, president of the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of the New Evangelization. How did you feel about that, what he wrote about your book and you?
Oh, I was thrilled to pieces, but it's very humbling to see, I mean, someone that I've known for years. I would certainly call him a friend, like all the others who endorse this. But the fact that Archbishop Fisichella heads the Pontifical Council that has organized the entire Holy Year of Mercy. I don't even know if anybody's sleeping at that council with all the work they had. So it meant a lot more to me that he took the time to write those beautiful words, and you find them on the back cover as well as in the first, as you said, the first pages of the book.
Right, exactly. And Father Gino Silva, who's working on it, and from the Diocese of Patterson in the USA, we'll be speaking with him next week, basically, about the Jubilee. Now, talking about this, in the beginning of the book, in the foreword of the book, you talk about finding mercy in Rome, and it starts off with, a pilgrim's journey to Rome can literally change one's life. Is that what it did to you? I mean, this is from Bishop Baker wrote the beginning of the book. He wrote the foreword. Was that relating
Yes.
to him and you? Did you find a mutual experience there?
Oh, absolutely, and even more profoundly now in this brief period that we have been living, the Jubilee of Mercy. But I go back to the first Holy Year, and that I experienced as a writer, as a person, as a Catholic living in Rome for the year 2000. And writing the book, looking up things, researching the history, gave me so much to think about. And then as I lived the various events, working for the Vatican at the time, as I lived the various events, everything took on an entire new meaning, a depth that I didn't even think possible when I wrote the book. For example, when I went through the Holy Door of St. Peter's in 2000, I have a picture of myself, just me, going through the Holy Door, because I was one of a very small number of people in the Roman Curia. It was our Jubilee, February 22nd, and I was asked to be one of the readers. And so as we went through the Holy Door, our picture was taken one at a time. That was a very profound movement, and I've carried that with me. And as I wrote this book, reliving Pope Francis's words, the day he announced this, as I said, the second anniversary of his election, announcing this amazing Jubilee of Mercy, and then the Bull of Indiction, being there at Vespers when the Bull of Indiction was read. It is very profound, and it does make you, with mercy, the Pope must say it 100 times a day. He must use that word. And it does really make you think about what we should be living, what mercy is, how we should live it out, as the Pope said in his recent letter for Lent. He wants us to do corporal and spiritual works of mercy. We should never get up in the morning without thinking about how mercy, being merciful, can be part of our day.
Well, I know Bishop Baker in the beginning says, in talking about you and in talking about this book, he says, most importantly, she, Joan, will help you get a grip on the meaning of mercy as it applies to you. She will help you appreciate the characteristics of divine mercy, God's attitude and action of mercy in your life, so that you may do several things he has listed here. One of them is, to tie into what you said, resolve to live in gratitude rather than according to needless desire. And that's an important way for us to be thinking, especially
word.
today.
Exactly. I agree, and I have to tell you that when Bishop Baker said he would be only too happy to write the foreword, and when I actually received it via email, I have to say, I hope I told him this, I had tears in my eyes with what he wrote, not just about me, our friendship, the years here, what I'm saying in the book about mercy, but all the, like you said, the little pieces of advice that he gives in the book to people when they come to Rome. Try to be this way, try to do that, and just what you cited.
Now, you also point out here in the beginning of the book, chapter 1, the journey of the Spirit, you say a pilgrimage is not only a trip to a destination, it is, as St. Benedict said in his rule, a return to the promised land, to paradise lost, to a place where man can speak to God one-to-one. And that's the important part of a pilgrimage, right? That we keep that prayerful aspect in mind, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And when I think of pilgrimages, and I mention this in that part of the book, when I think of pilgrimages, this is a comprehensive one in the sense of people coming to Rome or staying in their own diocese where there is a holy door, many plans, but you come to Rome, 7 pilgrim basilicas, 4 papal basilicas, and there's other pilgrimages, there's other shrines that we know. Obviously Assisi would come to mind. And a shrine, a pilgrimage, a church can be built around a person. It can be built around a miracle, around an act of mercy. And a pilgrimage is, we're on earth our entire existence is an earthly pilgrimage to our final destination. So I look at in the beginning, I look at the eschatological meaning of a pilgrimage, because that's what our whole life is, every step we take, every breath.
You also write, whatever the reason for an individual's pilgrimage, when it is undertaken with due spiritual preparation, the heart of a shrine becomes enshrined in the heart of the pilgrim. What did you mean by that?
Well, let's take an Assisi. I can't imagine a viewer not being familiar with Assisi, having read about it or been there. You go to this shrine built around a man who gave his entire existence to God. But St. Francis becomes really one of us. We want to become very much like him. So we visit this shrine. We go there with a heart filled with the idea of making a wonderful pilgrimage. That becomes part of who we are. It's in our minds. We see visual image. I love the expression, the mind's eye. We see these images even long after we've left a pilgrim spot. A moment, a person, 5 minutes, 2 hours in prayer at a meaningful ceremony. So it does, a visit to a shrine becomes so much a part of who we are. And I've always found that they don't leave us, those moments. They are enshrined in our hearts.
Well, you also talk about the idea of, like, you talk about votive gifts left at a shrine, and you refer to some Italian phrase that's short is PGR. What is a PGR?
PGR, which you'll see engraved on many, usually sterling silver votive offerings, it means per grazie ricevute, for graces received. Very often just a grace, sometimes even a miracle. And you'll find that these votive offerings often will, if it's a little child who's been healed of something, the votive offering may take the form of a baby. It may take the form of a child's piece of clothing. If somebody had a terrible leg problem threatening their life, circulation, whatever, and they had a healing because of a visit to a shrine, very often the votive offering will take the shape of a leg. It's absolutely fascinating. But people never want to just go and pray and that's it, God will help me and goodbye. They want to say thanks. They realize they had a grace, maybe even a miracle. And you do have to go back and thank God.
Right, we know that from our Lord's own stories about where are the others who were healed, who did not come back, in effect, to thank me. In the section talking about, in the glossary of terms where you talk about in the beginning to make everybody prep so they understand when they hear words like cathedral or ciborium or holy door, what that means. Now, in the one here, I wanted to ask you about catacombs, because people hear that and it sounds kind of interesting. They've seen it in movies. They hear about something called scavi. And you say here it's referred to a consecrated underground cemetery complex, was more than a traditional burial site because the Eucharist was celebrated there. Now, are there actual catacombs that people can go and visit when they're in Rome for a pilgrimage?
Oh, yes, there certainly are. And I would actually advise people, anybody who can get an appointment to visit the scavi in the Vatican, scavi meaning excavation, that will bring you to the tomb of St. Peter, the first pope. That is such an awesome experience. It's very intimate, very small area. You don't have groups of 50 and 100 going in. But there's the catacombs of St. Priscilla, of St. Calixtus. And I mention the catacombs but by name and their address in the book, so people do know where to go. And there will be organized trips, and there's public transportation in Rome to get you there. Right,
also. And I mentioned the Holy Door. You have that glossary here. So I read that and I thought, well, you know, how much information do you need about the idea of a door? But you said here, these doors are called holy doors, not only because of the symbolism, doors opening to allow the faithful physically to enter a church, as well as to enter a year dedicated to sanctifying their soul, but because all the materials used to build the doors and the hammers used to open them are blessed. In the Gospels of Jesus himself, he tells us that he is the door to heaven. I wasn't aware that that was a differentiation there.
So it is symbolic and it is real that they're holy doors. As I said, all the materials that go into making them. The holy door itself, the one in St. Peter's, it was a gift of Swiss Catholics, and that was placed there for the 1950 Jubilee and it was opened on Christmas Eve in 1949. But so the actual physical materials of the door itself, the hammer that they use to open, for example, the inside part that's usually walled up between Jubilees. So all the materials used have been blessed. So that is the real part of it being a holy door. And the other part, entering into a church, which is a physical thing, and then entering spiritually into a very holy period.
Right, exactly. Now you go on to talk about the Jubilees in history. You kind of sketch it out, and then you actually give a chron in the book that you can go through. You talk about the Holy Year. Let's talk about 1975. I thought this was interesting. Now, this was called by Paul VI, and it marked the 10th anniversary of the closing of the Vatican Council in 65. And he announces his general audience on May 9, 1973. And I thought that was interesting. You say, answering those who in recent years had questioned whether a Holy Year was an anachronism. That's interesting. He wanted to show that this whole idea of not a rupture with Vatican II, but a continuance, right?
Well, that and the fact that a holy year is, why should we discontinue holy years? Because somebody puts the idea out there, it's an anachronism. They say the same thing about the Swiss Guards. We still have, and probably, 1,000 years after we're gone, there will be Swiss Guards at the Vatican. But it's a very living, real, spiritual experience. Why would we want to do away with it? So a holy year, a Jubilee, is not anachronistic.
Right. And you also have not only a description of, the 7 basilicas, that pilgrimage basilicas, you also have pictures of them. Some of them are the ones, people are more familiar with, like St. Peter's and St. John Lateran and St. Paul's outside the walls. There's a couple of other ones that are a little bit different, like St. Lawrence. And one's the Basilica of St. Sebastian. And you note that there are catacombs beneath it that are inseparable in their history to this particular basilica, which comprises 4 distinct periods. That's very interesting. Is that one of your favorites?
Yes, it was. I think it was one of the first of the catacombs that I had visited, and one of the first non-papal basilicas that I learned were part of the 7 pilgrim churches. And it's out on the Appian Way. It's very, so you could almost like drive right by it and quickly say, oh, what's that? And it's not a great, big, majestic basilica from the outside. You go in, it's a wonderful basilica. There's the tomb of St. Sebastian. But then you proceed down into the catacombs, and life of our first Christian brothers and sisters becomes a reality.
Right. And what was the first time you saw that and visited that? What was that impact on you, their reality, as a Catholic?
I think I probably said I was in my 20s, and I'm sure the first time I went down in the catacombs, it was probably, wow, I had no idea. I mean, you've seen pictures in books and so forth, but you're actually down there, how they were buried, how bodies were laid out in what today, just little openings in the wall. Bodies were laid out. They were covered with lime so that bodies in some instances could be preserved, but so there would be no after-death odor. You were shown where families would gather around and break bread, have meals to celebrate the life of this person, but the passage into new life. And, as you said earlier, the masses that were held in many of the spots where the more famous martyrs and Christians, St. Peter, St. Paul, where they died.
You also bring up in chapter 8, you talk about Castel Gandolfo, and we hear about that, I guess, in relation to sometimes when the Holy Father in the past would kind of go on vacation in the summer or in August. He'd go to Castel Gandolfo, and you talk a little bit about it and give some background on it. One of the things I thought was interesting, you talk about it, it's located on what was once known as the Alba Longa, a city in ancient Latium, reputedly the birthplace of Romulus and Remus. That's an interesting fact.
Romulus and Remus. Romulus, of course, from whom we get the name of the city of Rome. And the reason I put the Castel Gandolfo in this book, we visit Vatican City, we visit the catacombs, we visit Castel Gandolfo. And by the way, I try to take people by the hand, as if I and 2 friends or 20 friends, we were walking to and through these places, because I often say we instead of I, visiting something. But Castel Gandolfo was important because it has been for so long. We became familiar, I think, more with John Paul than anybody else. He loved Castel Gandolfo, so did Benedict. Francis doesn't really like to take vacations. But Castel Gandolfo now, the property with a 26-acre farm, 26-hectare farm, and in area, it's actually bigger than Vatican City in Rome. So it's now open to visitors. Right. There are very special tours there. How to get there is all in the book. Right. So you can see inside some of the buildings, you can see the gardens and the farm.
Right, exactly. And when you say hectare, you're not talking about an individual bothering someone. You're actually talking about a measurement of land
right.
that most people don't hear
I think a hectare,
very much anymore.
You're right.
But also,
I think it's like 2.5 acres, something like that.
I trust you. And with the schedule, you have not only of the past Jubilees, but you also have the schedule that runs throughout the year of some of the events. And even later this month, there's the Jubilee for the Roman
right.
Curia. Next month, I thought this was interesting. Friday and Saturday, March 4th and 5th, 24 hours for the Lord, a penitential liturgy in St. Peter's Basilica on the afternoon of Friday, March 4th. So, you know, sometimes people confuse the idea that mercy is all about, you know, everything's fine and I don't really have to do anything or worry about everything. But mercy is tied into
right.
penitence, right?
Oh, for sure. And the Holy Father, Pope Francis, always makes that link between mercy and penance and penitence and just turning over a new leaf in a way, in your life. And so that ceremony will be very meaningful. But he's had that the previous 2 years of his, the March one you were referring to, the previous 2 years of his papacy. And then, of course, not to be forgotten, I mean, the arrival of the body, of the remains, the incorrupt body of St. Padre Pio, and that is on, of course, Ash Wednesday. Right. So many, many big events. There's events for young people. There's events. We just had an event for pilgrimage leaders and shrine rectors, a right. very big event. How could you not have it in a holy year? Right, exactly. Padre Pio is actually happening the week that basically we're recording this, and the week that we're airing this interview, basically right. February 8th through the 14th, and then of course Ash Wednesday on the 10th. And one of the other events I thought was interesting, coming up in April, here we are in the Year of Mercy, of course, on Divine Mercy Sunday itself, we have the Jubilee for those who are devoted to the right. spirituality of Divine Mercy, which many, many of our EWTN viewers and listeners obviously are. One of the things sure. I thought was interesting. Well, you know, and I almost did one. I was going to say, because we're just about running out of time, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that you're a practical American girl at heart. And so you've never got that out of you. So one of the most important things you put in the back of your book is, so you want a great meal. And, you know, sometimes you've been known as you're our Rome Bureau Chief and also our Rome Bureau Chef, because everyone goes to eat at Rome. The original title of the play Casablanca was based on was Everybody Comes to Rick's. Well, in your case, it was Everybody Goes to Joan's. But you actually put restaurants in the back. Now, are these some of your personal favorites then? They're my personal favorites, and then there were a couple that people mentioned. All of them I've been to and eaten at. They're not in there just as a place to go. I tried to cover different areas of Rome in and around the Vatican, Piazza Navona, Janiculum, near the North American College, other parts of Rome, not the real periphery, but where right. your tourists might like to go. But they do want advice, so I tell the address, phone number, the days they're closed, if that's the case, and so forth. And so enjoy. Buon appetito. Should they use your name when making a reservation? Absolutely. You tell them that Joan sent them. Joan sent them. Some of the ones we hear, La Vittoria, we hear Zigatana, Pierluigi, Pierluigi, just a couple. Right. That's so La much. Scaletta, right. Yes, Yes, so I don't want you to leave anybody out. So I just wanted to make sure we brought those up. And we don't want to leave anybody out. And Joan Lewis always is one of those people who takes us inside what's happening in Rome. It's a city she loves and knows so well. And that's why this is the complete Pilgrim's Guide for the Jubilee of Mercy. Joan Lewis, our Rome Bureau Chief, A Holy Year in Rome. You love Joan's blog. You love how she writes. That's just the way this book is written.
Check it out. Check us out next time. Thank you so much, Joan Lewis. Always a pleasure to see you, my friend, and talk with you. God bless.
God bless you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Joan. And check out A Holy Year in Rome, a complete pilgrim's guide for the Jubilee of Mercy by the one and only Joan Lewis, EWTN's religious catalog, EWTNRC.com. A must-have this year for the Jubilee of Mercy. I'm Doug Keck. Join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.